The dream gift. Corey Baines stood at her bedroom window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared out at the bustling city below. The sun was shining, casting a golden hue over the streets, but Corey's thoughts were far away. She turned back to the small, cluttered desk in the corner of her room, where a collection of brightly colored envelopes and crumpled bills lay spread out. She was counting her savings one more time, just to be sure. It had taken months of allowance, birthday money, and a few odd jobs for her neighbors to amass the sum she needed. Corey wasn't saving for herself. She had something far more important in mind. A gift for her best friend, Amara. They'd been inseparable since kindergarten, bonding over their shared love of superheroes, glittery crafts, and the dream of one day becoming famous singers. Amara was like a sister to Corey, and her birthday was just around the corner. This year, Corey wanted to give Amara something unforgettable. Not just a toy, but something that spoke to who she was. A doll that looked like her, with deep brown skin, coiled hair, and eyes that shone with the same determination Amara always carried. They joked many times about how hard it was to find dolls that looked like them, but Corey was determined to change that for her friend. The door creaked open behind her, and Corey's dad, Marcus Baines, peeked in. Marcus wasn't just any dad. He was a legend in the music industry, known worldwide as the iconic rapper and entrepreneur MB, but to Corey, he was just dad, the guy who made the best pancakes and always had a piece of advice ready when she needed it. "You counting that stash again, superstar?" Marcus asked, a teasing grin on his face. Corey smiled and nodded, just making sure. "I've got exactly enough to get the doll I saw online." Marcus stepped into the room, his tall frame filling the doorway. He crossed his arms and gave her a proud nod. "I like that you're putting all this effort into something for your friend. That's love right there. You sure about the store, though? They got what you're looking for?" Corey hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing the edge of one of the envelopes. "I think so. It's the biggest toy store in the city. If they don't have it, no one will." Her dad's expression softened. "All right. But remember, Corey, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're doing this because you care, not because you have to." "I know, Dad," she replied, her resolve firm. "This is for Amara. She deserves to feel special." Marcus nodded, his signature smile spreading across his face. "All right then, let's get moving. Big day ahead." The car ride to the store was filled with laughter and music, Marcus playing Corey's favorite tracks as they navigated through the city streets. The toy store, an iconic landmark with its towering glass facade and ornate golden doors, loomed ahead like a palace of childhood dreams. Corey felt her nerves tingle with excitement as they pulled into the parking lot. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, parking the car and looking over at her. Corey nodded, clutching her small purse tightly. "Yeah, I'm ready." Inside, the store was like a wonderland, filled with vibrant colors, twinkling lights, and rows upon rows of toys. Corey's eyes sparkled as she took it all in, but she quickly reminded herself of her mission. She was here for one thing, the perfect doll for Amara. The doll section was tucked away near the back of the store, a glittering display of miniature figures in all shapes and sizes. Corey scanned the shelves, her heart racing as she searched for the one she had seen online. After a few minutes, her eyes landed on it, a beautiful doll with rich brown skin, natural curls, and a dazzling outfit that reminded Corey of Amara's favorite style. "This is it," Corey whispered to herself, reaching for the doll with trembling hands. But just as her fingers closed around the box, a sharp voice interrupted her. "Can I help you?" Corey turned to see a woman standing nearby, her arms crossed and a tight smile on her face. The woman, whose name tag read Miss Harper, looked Corey up and down, her gaze lingering on her oversized hoodie and sneakers. Corey hesitated, feeling her confidence waver. "I was just looking at this doll," she said softly. Ms. Harper's smile didn't waver, but there was something cold in her tone. "That's part of our premium collection. Are you sure you're in the right section? Corey blinked, her hands tightening around the box. I have money, she said quickly. I can pay for it. Ms. Harper's eyes narrowed slightly, and she gestured toward another section of the store. Maybe you'd be more comfortable over there. That's where we keep our clearance items. Corey felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She glanced at the aisle Miss Harper had indicated, a dimly lit corner filled with dusty shelves and outdated toys. Her heart sank, but she squared her shoulders and looked the woman in the eye. No, she said firmly. I want this one. Miss Harper's smile faded, replaced by a look of irritation. I'm afraid that's not an option. Before Corey could respond, the woman turned on her heel and walked away, leaving her standing there, the doll still clutched in her hands. Corey's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes as the moment replayed in her mind. She had saved every penny for this, dreamed of this moment, and now it felt like it was slipping away. Taking a deep breath, Corey stepped back toward the main aisle, determined not to let Miss Harper ruin her day. But just as she started to walk away, the woman returned, this time with another employee in tow. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Miss Harper said, her tone sharper now. Corey froze, her heart pounding. What? Why? The woman folded her arms, her gaze hard. You don't belong here. The words hit Corey like a punch to the gut. She blinked back tears, her vision blurring as the weight of the humiliation sank in. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she turned and stumbled toward the exit, her breath hitching as she reached for her phone. Dad, she said, her voice trembling as she dialed his number. Can you come inside? Please. The call ended, and Corey stood outside the store, the cold air biting at her skin. She felt small, invisible, and helpless. But as the golden doors reflected her tear-streaked face, a spark of determination flickered within her. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The power of presence. Corey's heart raced as she stood outside the store, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The city buzzed around her, cars honking, people chatting on their way to lunch, the occasional bark of a dog. But the noise felt distant, like she was trapped in her own bubble of shame and confusion. She replayed Miss Harper's words in her head. You don't belong here. Each repetition hit harder, feeding the simmering mixture of anger and sadness swirling in her chest. The golden doors behind her swung open, and her father, Marcus Baines, strode in. He wore a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, his gold chain glinting in the sunlight. His calm, steady energy contrasted sharply with Corey's emotional turmoil. Marcus scanned her face, crouched down to meet her at eye level, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. What happened, superstar? He asked, his voice a soothing balm against her frayed nerves. Corey swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. The lady inside. She said I didn't belong. She told me to go to the clearance section, and then told me to leave. I didn't do anything wrong, Dad. I just wanted to get the doll. Marcus's jaw tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood, adjusted his blazer, and took her hand. Let's go, he said simply. Corey hesitated, her feet rooted to the pavement. Dad, it's okay. We don't have to. We do, he interrupted gently but firmly. Come on. We're fixing this. Inside, the store's grandeur felt colder and more imposing than before. Corey stuck close to her dad, her fingers gripping his hand tightly as they navigated the aisles. People stopped to stare, some recognizing Marcus immediately. The whispers began, soft at first, then growing louder as they reached the doll section. Miss Harper was still there, standing near the same display Corey had been inspecting earlier. Her posture stiffened when she saw them, and her face betrayed a flicker of recognition and unease. She quickly recovered, plastering on a thin smile as they approached. Good afternoon, Ms. Harper greeted, her voice as rehearsed as a voicemail message. How can I help you today? Marcus didn't waste any time. You can start by explaining why you treated my daughter like she didn't belong here." Ms. Harper blinked, clearly caught off guard. She straightened her posture, clutching her clipboard, as though it could shield her from the confrontation. "Sir, She told me what happened," Marcus continued, his voice calm but edged with authority. "She came in here to buy a doll, one she's been saving up for. Instead of treating her with respect, you insulted her, dismissed her, and told her to leave. Is that how you run this store?" I didn't mean to." Ms. Harper began, but Marcus cut her off. "Don't lie to me. This isn't about what you meant. It's about what you did. You looked at her and decided she didn't belong. You treated her like a problem instead of a customer." The crowd of shoppers that had been gathering grew larger, their murmurs filling the air. Phones were coming out, cameras angled discreetly, or not so discreetly, toward the scene unfolding. Corey felt the weight of the attention but kept her gaze fixed on the doll display, her fingers trembling as she clutched her dad's arm. Ms. Harper's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she turned toward the counter. "Let me get the manager." "You do that," Marcus replied, his tone unwavering. The manager, a tall, balding man in his mid-50s, arrived a few moments later. He wore a tailored suit that screamed corporate, and his expression was carefully neutral. As he approached, he extended a hand to Marcus, who ignored it. "Mr. Baines," the manager began, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "My daughter was humiliated in your store. She was told she didn't belong. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." The manager hesitated, glancing around at the crowd that had now grown into a full-fledged audience. He shifted uncomfortably, then cleared his throat. "We take these matters very seriously, sir. I assure you we'll conduct a full investigation." "Don't bother," Marcus interrupted. "The problem is standing right there." He pointed at Ms. Harper, whose face had turned a deep shade of red. "Your employee looked at my daughter and judged her because of the way she looks. You don't need an investigation to see what's wrong." The manager's composure faltered for a moment before he recovered. "We deeply apologize for any inconvenience caused. I'll ensure this matter is handled appropriately." "I don't want apologies," Marcus replied. "I want accountability." The conversation shifted to a private office in the back of the store. Corey sat beside her dad, her hands gripping the doll she had refused to leave behind. The manager fumbled through corporate jargon, offering empty promises of diversity training and updated policies. But Marcus wasn't satisfied. "This isn't just about fixing one employee," Marcus said, his tone sharper now. "This is about your entire culture. You think a training seminar is going to undo the damage you've done to kids like my daughter? You think that's enough?" The manager stammered, clearly out of his depth. "Mr. Baines, we're committed to making this right." "Good," Marcus cut in. "Here's how you do that. First, you fire her." He nodded toward Ms. Harper, who was seated across the room, her face a mask of barely concealed frustration. "Then you start donating toys to underprivileged kids. And I don't mean just once. I mean every year, every holiday. You make this store about more than just selling overpriced toys to rich families." The manager opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus held up a hand. "And don't think I won't hold you accountable. I've got a platform, and I'm not afraid to use it." The tension in the room was palpable. Corey looked up at her dad, her heart swelling with pride and a newfound sense of strength. He wasn't just standing up for her. He was standing up for every kid who had ever been made to feel invisible. By the time they left the office, the store was eerily quiet. Shoppers had dispersed, but a few lingered, their phones still out, capturing the aftermath. Marcus led Corey out into the sunlight, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "You okay, superstar?" he asked, looking down at her. Corey nodded, her grip tightening on the doll. "Yeah, I think I am." But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The turning point. The ride home from the store was unusually quiet. Corey sat in the passenger seat, clutching the doll she had fought so hard to keep, her mind racing with the events that had just unfolded. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the city streets, but Corey barely noticed. She was too caught up in the weight of her father's words, the looks from the crowd, and the sharp sting of Miss Harper's accusations. Her father, Marcus, drove in silence, his jaw set in a way Corey hadn't seen before. He wasn't just angry, he was determined. She could feel it in the way he gripped the steering wheel, in the measured pace of his breathing. He glanced over at her once, his eyes softening when he saw the tension etched into her face. "You did good in there, Corey," he said finally, breaking the silence. Corey blinked, caught off guard by the statement. "But I didn't do anything." "You stood your ground," he said firmly. "That takes guts, especially when someone tries to make you feel small. Don't ever forget that." She nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. The memory of Miss Harper's cold gaze and the words "you don't belong here" still echoed in her mind. No matter how much she tried to focus on her father's reassurances, the humiliation lingered. When they arrived home, the house felt quieter than usual. Corey went straight to her room, placing the doll carefully on her dresser before flopping onto her bed. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts swirling. Was it really over? Would the store actually change? And why did it still hurt so much? Downstairs, Corey could hear her father pacing in the kitchen, his voice low as he made call after call. She couldn't catch all the words, but phrases like unacceptable, accountability, and public response floated up to her. Corey knew her dad was a man of action, but this felt bigger than anything she'd ever seen him handle before. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through social media. To her surprise, videos of the incident had already started circulating. Clips of Marcus standing up to the store manager and confronting Ms. Harper had been posted by bystanders, and the comments were piling up fast. "This is what racism looks like. Shame on the store for treating a child like this. Corey, you're a hero for standing up for yourself." Her heart skipped a beat as she read the messages. Some were encouraging, others furious at the store's behavior, but all of them were watching, paying attention. It felt strange to see her experience playing out in front of so many strangers. A part of her wanted to curl up and hide, but another part, the part her dad always said was her strongest, felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of all this. The next morning, Corey woke to the sound of voices downstairs. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, noticing the faint smell of coffee and the distant hum of conversation. Curious, she threw on her hoodie and made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, the house was buzzing with activity. Her father was on the phone again, pacing back and forth as he spoke to someone with the intensity of a man on a mission. A few of his team members were seated at the dining table, laptops open and notepads scattered across the surface. One of them waved at Corey as she entered. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice still groggy from sleep. Marcus ended his call and turned to her with a small smile. "Morning, superstar. We're making moves." "Moves?" she echoed, confused. "People are talking about what happened," he explained, gesturing to one of the laptops. "It's all over social media. The story's out there, and now we got a chance to do something about it." Corey frowned, her stomach twisting. "I didn't want this to be a big deal. I just wanted to buy a doll." Her father crouched down so they were eye level, his expression serious but gentle. "I know, Corey, and it shouldn't have been a big deal. But the fact that it turned into one, that's not on you. That's on them. And now we've got an opportunity to make sure no one else goes through what you did." Corey hesitated, her mind racing. She thought about Amara, about how excited she'd been to give her the doll, and about the countless kids who might have been treated the same way, but didn't have someone like her dad to stand up for them. Slowly, she nodded. "What are we gonna do?" she asked. Marcus grinned, his eyes lighting up with pride. "We're gonna make some noise." By the afternoon, The house felt more like a command center than a home. Reporters had started calling, and Marcus had already lined up interviews with a few major networks. Corey was nervous at first, unsure if she was ready to share her story with the world, but her father promised he'd be with her every step of the way. Their first interview took place in the living room, the bright lights of the camera crew making Corey feel like she was on stage. She clutched the doll tightly in her lap, her palms sweaty as the reporter asked her to recount what had happened. "It was supposed to be a happy day," Corey said, her voice trembling slightly. "I saved up for months to buy this for my best friend. But when I got to the store, the lady there, Ms. Harper, looked at me like I didn't belong. She told me to go to the clearance section, and then told me to leave." She paused, her throat tightening. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to buy a doll." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "How did that make you feel?" Corey took a deep breath, glancing at her dad before answering. "It made me feel small, like I wasn't good enough. But my dad told me that wasn't true. And now, I want to make sure no other kid feels that way." The interview aired later that evening, and within hours, the story exploded. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people rallied around Corey's experience, demanding accountability from the toy store. Hashtags like #JusticeForCorey and #RepresentationMatters began trending, and the pressure on the store grew by the minute. That night, Marcus sat with Corey on the couch, scrolling through the flood of messages on social media. He showed her some of the posts, pointing out the ones that stood out. "Look at this," he said, holding up his phone. "Parents are sharing their own stories about discrimination in stores. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about all of them, too." Corey nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She had never imagined that her small act of standing up for herself could resonate with so many people. For the first time since the incident, she felt a spark of pride. Maybe her dad was right. Maybe they could make a difference. As the evening wore on, the house began to quiet down, the energy from the day finally settling. Corey sat on her bed, staring at the doll on her dresser. It no longer felt like a simple gift. It felt like a symbol of something much bigger. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Amara. "Hey, got a big surprise for you. Can't wait for you to see it." For the first time in days, Corey smiled. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't alone in this fight. And together, they were going to make sure no one else ever felt invisible again. The tipping point. The morning after the story broke, Corey woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on her nightstand. She reached over groggily and squinted at the screen, her eyes widening as she read the flurry of notifications. Text messages, emails, and social media tags flooded her phone, all centered on the viral video of her experience at the toy store. The hashtags #JusticeForCorey and #RepresentationMatters had not only taken over social media, but had also sparked a broader conversation about discrimination and inclusion. People from all walks of life were sharing their stories, some heartbreakingly similar to Corey's. A few celebrities had even chimed in, lending their platforms to amplify the cause. Corey's heart raced as she scrolled through the messages. The support was overwhelming, but so was the sheer weight of it all. Her small, personal moment of standing up for herself had spiraled into something much bigger than she'd ever imagined. Downstairs, the house was a hive of activity. Marcus had turned the living room into a temporary command center, with his team working tirelessly to coordinate interviews, respond to media inquiries, and organize the next steps. Corey lingered in the doorway, watching as her father juggled phone calls and emails with his usual calm demeanor. "Morning, superstar," he called out when he noticed her, waving her over. "You see this?" He gestured to a laptop screen showing a major news outlet's homepage. The headline read, "Young Girl Sparks Nationwide Debate on Discrimination in Retail." Corey blinked at the headline, her chest tightening. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "It is," Marcus said, his voice steady. "And that's a good thing. People are paying attention now. But this is where the real work begins. Corey frowned, sitting down beside him. What do you mean? Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. It's not enough to just talk about what happened. We've got to push for real change. That means holding the store accountable, sure, but it also means looking at the bigger picture. How many other kids have been treated like you? How many adults? This is about more than one store. It's about fixing the system. Corey nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. She had felt small and powerless in that toy store, but now, with the world watching, she realized she had a chance to make a difference. Later that day, Marcus and Corey prepared for a press conference outside the toy store. The company's corporate office had issued a public apology the day before, but it had been met with skepticism. People wanted more than just words. They wanted action. The parking lot outside the store was packed with reporters, their cameras and microphones trained on the makeshift stage, where Marcus and Corey were set to speak. A crowd of supporters had also gathered, holding signs with messages like, "Justice for Corey" and "Representation Matters." Corey's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her hoodie. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, but her father's reassuring presence beside her helped steady her nerves. "You got this," Marcus whispered as they stepped onto the stage together. The crowd erupted into applause, and Corey felt a mix of nerves and pride as she approached the microphone. Marcus spoke first, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the audience. "What happened to my daughter isn't unique," he began. "It's a reflection of a much larger problem, a problem that too many people face every day. Discrimination, whether subtle or blatant, has no place in our society, and it certainly has no place in a store that's supposed to bring joy to children." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "We're here today not just to demand accountability from this store, but to call for systemic change. This isn't just about one employee or one incident. It's about creating a world where every child feels valued, respected, and seen." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Marcus stepped back, motioning for Corey to take the microphone. She hesitated for a moment, her palms sweating, but then she stepped forward, clutching the doll tightly in her hands. "Hi," she began, her voice shaky but growing steadier with each word. "I didn't think this would happen. I just wanted to buy a gift for my best friend. I didn't want to be the center of attention or start a movement. But now that we're here, I want to say something." She looked out at the crowd, her gaze steady. "It's not fair that kids like me have to fight to be treated the same as everyone else. It's not fair that we're made to feel like we don't belong. That has to change. And I'm glad so many people are speaking out, because together we can make things better." The crowd roared with applause, and Corey felt a surge of pride and relief. She stepped back, and Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, beaming with pride. As the press conference wrapped up, Corey and Marcus were approached by a representative from the toy store's corporate office. The woman, a polished executive with a crisp suit and a strained smile, introduced herself as Ms. Jennings. "Mr. Baines, Corey," she began, her tone professional but apologetic. "I want to personally apologize for what happened in our store. We've terminated the employee involved and are implementing mandatory diversity training for all staff. We're also launching a new initiative to donate toys to underprivileged children." Marcus studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. "That's a start," he said finally. "But words and promises aren't enough. We'll be watching to make sure you follow through." Ms. Jennings nodded, her smile faltering slightly under his intense gaze. "Understood. We're committed to making this right." As she walked away, Corey turned to her dad. "Do you think they mean it?" Marcus sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Time will tell. But what matters is that they know we're not backing down." That evening, as the sun set over the city, Corey and Marcus returned home to find their front porch overflowing with packages. Letters, toys, and gifts from strangers all over the country had been delivered, each one accompanied by a note of support. Corey picked up one of the letters and opened it, her eyes welling up as she read the words. "Thank you for standing up for yourself and for all of us. You're an inspiration." Her father crouched beside her, picking up another package. "Looks like you've got a whole army behind you now," he said with a grin. Corey smiled through her tears. She had started this journey feeling small and powerless, but now she realized just how much strength she had, and how much more she could do. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a movement, and she was ready to keep pushing forward. Building a movement. The days following the press conference were a whirlwind of activity. Corey and Marcus's story continued to dominate headlines, with news outlets and social media amplifying the call for systemic change in retail and beyond. What had started as a painful incident in a toy store had blossomed into something much larger, a movement. Corey, who had once been content to stay in the background, now found herself thrust into the spotlight. She and Marcus were invited to speak at events, participate in discussions, and join panels on inclusion and representation. Despite the growing attention, Corey remained grounded, focusing on the deeper purpose behind it all, ensuring that no child ever had to feel as invisible as she had that day. One crisp morning, Corey sat at the dining room table, sifting through a pile of letters that had been sent to their home. Since the story broke, people from all over the world had written to her, sharing their experiences and thanking her for speaking out. Many of the letters were from kids, some as young as 6 or 7, who told her about how they'd faced similar discrimination. One letter, written in a wobbly hand on pink stationery, stood out. It read, "Dear Corey, my name is Maya, and I'm 9 years old. I saw what happened to you, and it made me really sad because I've been through something like that too. My mom says you're really brave, and I think you're a hero. Thank you for standing up for kids like me." Corey read the letter twice, her chest tightening. She had never thought of herself as brave or as a hero, but Maya's words filled her with a sense of purpose. She glanced over at her dad, who was busy on a phone call nearby. "Dad," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus ended his call and turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "What's up, superstar?" Corey held up the letter. "We need to do more." Marcus smiled, sitting down across from her. "I was hoping you'd say that. What are you thinking?" Corey hesitated, her fingers brushing the edges of the letter. "I want to help kids like Maya. Kids who feel invisible or left out. I want to do something big." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Big, huh? Like what?" Corey's mind raced as she spoke, the ideas coming together in real time. "A giveaway," she said finally. "Not just toys, but dolls that look like us. Dolls that make kids feel seen. We could donate them to schools, shelters, and community centers. We could even start a foundation to keep it going." Marcus's eyes lit up, and he nodded. "Now you're thinking big, Corey. I love it. Let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, Corey and Marcus threw themselves into planning the event. They reached out to toy manufacturers, community leaders, and activists, rallying support for their cause. Donations poured in from individuals and corporations alike, and volunteers lined up to help. Marcus even used his connections in the entertainment industry to bring in big names who wanted to support the initiative. As the plans took shape, Corey found herself more involved than ever. She helped design the event's logo, 2 hands holding a doll, with the words "Representation Matters" written in bold letters, and worked with the volunteers to sort through the thousands of donated toys. Each doll was carefully inspected to ensure it reflected the diversity they wanted to celebrate. The day before the event, Corey and Marcus stood in the warehouse they had rented to store the toys. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched out before them, filled with dolls, books, and games. Volunteers bustled around, organizing the items and setting up displays. Corey walked down one of the aisles, running her fingers along the boxes. Each doll felt like a small victory, a tangible reminder of the impact they were making. She stopped in front of a shelf lined with dolls that looked just like the one she had fought so hard to buy for Amira. For the first time, she felt a sense of closure, not because the pain of what had happened was gone, but because she was turning it into something positive. Her father joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did this," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We did this," she corrected, smiling up at him. The morning of the event, the atmosphere was electric. The community center where the giveaway was being held was packed with families, volunteers, and media crews. The large banner reading "Representation Matters Giveaway" hung above the entrance, and balloons in every color of the rainbow lined the pathway leading inside. Corey stood near the entrance, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. She wore a bright yellow hoodie with the event's logo on the front and held a clipboard in her hands. Volunteers buzzed around her, checking last-minute details and greeting the families who were starting to arrive. The first family to enter was a young mother with two little girls, both of whom clutched their mother's hands tightly. Corey stepped forward, her smile warm but nervous. "Hi," she said, kneeling to the girl's level. "Welcome to the giveaway. Are you excited?" The older girl, who looked about 7, nodded shyly. "Yeah," she said, her eyes wide as she glanced around at the colorful displays. Corey handed each of them a gift bag and guided them to the doll section. Watching their faces light up as they picked out dolls that looked just like them was a moment Corey would never forget. It was exactly why she had fought so hard to make this event happen. As the day went on, the community center buzzed with laughter, music, and the excited chatter of kids exploring the rows of toys. Volunteers worked tirelessly to ensure every family felt welcome, and Corey floated between them, helping wherever she could. At one point, she spotted a little girl holding a doll with brown skin and braids, much like Corey's own. The girl's smile was radiant as she hugged the doll tightly to her chest. Corey approached her and knelt down. "Do you like it?" she asked. The girl nodded enthusiastically. "She looks just like me." Corey's heart swelled, and she smiled. "She's perfect, just like you." By the end of the day, hundreds of families had come through the event, and the shelves were nearly empty. As the last few families trickled out, Corey and Marcus stood together, surveying the room. The exhaustion of the day was evident, but so was the sense of accomplishment. "We did it," Corey said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Marcus nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You started something incredible, superstar. And this is just the beginning." Corey looked around the room, her eyes landing on the banner above the stage. The words "Representation Matters" seemed to glow in the evening light, a reminder of the work that still lay ahead. But for the first time, Corey felt ready to take it on. This wasn't just a giveaway, it was a movement, and she was proud to be at the heart of it. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting warm hues through the large windows of the community center, Corey took a moment to herself. She walked to the corner of the room where the original doll, the one that had sparked everything, sat on a display table. It had become a symbol of the movement, prominently featured in photos and news stories about the event. She picked it up, tracing her fingers over the box. The doll now carried a weight it hadn't before. It wasn't just a toy anymore. It was a beacon for the hundreds of kids who had walked through the doors that day, each leaving with something more than just a gift. They were walking out with the message that they mattered, that they belonged. Her father's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. "Corey, someone's here to see you." She turned to see a small group approaching. Amara and her family. Corey's face lit up as Amara broke into a sprint, throwing her arms around Corey in a tight hug. "Corey, this is amazing," Amara exclaimed, her voice filled with awe as she looked around the transformed space. "I saw you on TV. And now, this. You did all this." Corey shrugged modestly, her cheeks flushing. "It wasn't just me. Dad helped a lot. And so many people donated and volunteered. But yeah, I wanted to do something special." Amara's eyes drifted to the doll in Corey's hands, and her jaw dropped. "Wait, is that the one?" Corey nodded, grinning as she handed the doll to Amara. "It's yours. Happy late birthday." Amara's expression softened, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the gift. "Corey, this is perfect. Thank you." The two friends hugged again, and for a moment, the noise of the bustling center seemed to fade away. Corey felt a deep sense of peace. Despite all the chaos, the interviews, the planning, and the pressure, this moment made it all worth it. As the cleanup began, Corey found herself working alongside the volunteers. They dismantled tables, packed up decorations, and organized the remaining toys to be sent to local shelters and schools. Every now and then, someone would stop to thank her, telling her how much the event had meant to their family. One mother, a woman with warm brown eyes and a kind smile, approached Corey with her young son in tow. The boy clutched a toy car, his face alight with joy. "I just wanted to say thank you," the mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "My son, he doesn't always feel welcome in spaces like this. But today, he felt seen. He felt like he belonged. That's because of you." Corey's throat tightened, and she blinked back tears. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "That means so much." As the mother and son walked away, Corey turned to her dad, who was watching the interaction from a distance. He gave her a small nod, his eyes glinting with pride. Later that evening, the community center was finally quiet. Most of the volunteers had gone home, and the last of the toys had been loaded into trucks. Corey and Marcus stood outside, leaning against his car and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You changed lives today, superstar," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "Not just for the kids who came, but for everyone who saw this. You proved something important." Corey looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "What's that?" "That one voice can start something big," he said. "You didn't just speak up, you kept going. You turned a moment of pain into a movement for change. That's not easy to do." Corey smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I had a pretty great coach." Marcus chuckled, ruffling her hair. "You sure did." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching as the city lights twinkled in the distance. Corey thought about everything they had accomplished, but also about the work that still needed to be done. This was just the beginning, and she was ready to keep pushing forward. "What's next?" she asked, her voice steady. Marcus grinned. "Whatever you want, superstar. The world's watching. Let's give them something to see." Corey nodded, a spark of determination lighting her eyes. This wasn't just a story about what had happened to her. It was a story about what could happen when people came together to make a difference. And she was ready to write the next chapter. A legacy of change. The morning after the giveaway event, Corey woke up feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She lay in bed for a few moments, staring at the ceiling as the events of the previous day played in her mind like a vivid dream. Hundreds of children had walked through the doors of the community center, each leaving with toys and a renewed sense of belonging. The smiles, the laughter, and the sheer joy had made every ounce of effort worth it. But as Corey stretched and got ready for the day, she realized the work wasn't over, not even close. What they'd accomplished so far was only the beginning. Her father's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "You turned a moment of pain into a movement for change." Corey wanted to keep that momentum going, to make sure this wasn't just a one-time event, but the foundation of something lasting. Downstairs, the dining table was once again covered in laptops, notebooks, and scattered papers. Marcus was already on a conference call, his voice confident and calm as he discussed the next steps with his team. When he saw Corey enter, he gave her a quick thumbs up before wrapping up the call. "Morning, superstar," he said, setting his phone aside. "You ready to keep making waves?" Corey smiled, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Always. What's the plan?" Marcus gestured to the chaos on the table. "We've got a lot of opportunities coming in. Companies want to partner with us, nonprofits are reaching out, and the media's still buzzing. But I think it's time we talk about what you want to do next." Corey sat down, her hands resting on the table. "I've been thinking about that. The giveaway was amazing, but I don't want it to stop there. What if we started something bigger, a foundation, maybe, something that focuses on representation and making sure every kid feels seen? Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. I like it. What would it look like? Corey's mind raced as she spoke, the ideas flowing freely. We could do more giveaways, but not just toys. Books, art supplies, anything that inspires kids to dream big. And we could work with schools to create programs that celebrate diversity. Maybe even scholarships for kids who want to make a difference in their communities. Marcus grinned, clearly impressed. Now that's a plan. You know this means a lot of work, right? Building something like this isn't easy. Corey met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. I know, but I'm ready. Over the next few months, Corey and Marcus worked tirelessly to bring the idea to life. They named the foundation Representation Matters, a name that encapsulated the heart of their mission. The foundation's logo, a stylized image of two hands holding a globe filled with diverse faces, became a symbol of inclusion and hope. The launch event for the foundation was held at the same community center where the giveaway had taken place. This time, the space was transformed into a vibrant celebration, complete with live music, art displays, and a stage where Corey and Marcus would unveil their plans. The turnout was overwhelming. Families, community leaders, educators, and even a few celebrities packed the room, all eager to support the cause. Corey stood backstage, clutching her speech notes as her nerves bubbled to the surface. You nervous? Marcus asked, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. A little, Corey admitted. Okay, a lot. Marcus chuckled. You've got this, superstar. Just speak from the heart. When it was finally time to take the stage, Corey's nerves melted away as she saw the sea of supportive faces. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady and clear. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her words carrying a mix of gratitude and passion. When I walked into that toy store months ago, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know that something so painful could lead to something so powerful. But it did, and it's because of all of you, your support, your voices, and your belief that we can make things better. She paused, letting her words sink in. Representation Matters isn't just about toys or giveaways. It's about creating a world where every kid feels valued, where they see themselves in the stories they read, the shows they watch, and the opportunities they have. It's about building a future where no one has to fight to feel like they belong. The crowd erupted into applause, and Corey felt a surge of pride and hope. She had stepped into a role she never expected, but it felt right, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the months that followed, Representation Matters quickly gained momentum. The foundation launched initiatives across the country, from diversity-focused school programs to art contests celebrating cultural heritage. Corey and Marcus traveled to different cities, meeting with kids, parents, and educators to spread their message. One of the foundation's most impactful projects was the creation of a new line of dolls designed to reflect the full spectrum of human diversity. Corey worked closely with designers, ensuring that every doll told a story and represented a child who might not have seen themselves in the toys on store shelves before. The dolls became a hit, but more importantly, they became a symbol of change. Schools started incorporating them into lessons about acceptance and empathy, and parents wrote letters thanking the foundation for making their children feel seen. As the first anniversary of the toy store incident approached, Corey and Marcus found themselves reflecting on how far they'd come. They sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the city. Do you ever think about that day? Corey asked, her voice quiet. All the time, Marcus admitted. It was a hard day, but look at what it started. Sometimes, the hardest moments are the ones that push us to grow the most. Corey nodded, her gaze distant. I still get mad when I think about how Miss Harper treated me. But now, I think I'm more grateful than anything. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. Marcus smiled, pulling her into a side hug. Life has a funny way of turning pain into purpose, doesn't it? As the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Corey felt a sense of peace. She knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Together, she and her father had turned a moment of injustice into a movement of hope. And as she looked out at the city lights, she couldn't wait to see what the future held. This was only the beginning.